Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Stephanie Garner. I am the parent lead of the Plainfield CPAC. So excited that you could join us tonight for our town hall presentation on competitive integrated employment. We have two amazing ladies joining us today. Kathleen Hardy Hansen, who is with the Indiana Secondary Transition Resource Center and the Center on Community Living and Careers at Indiana University, as well as Sandy Block, who is the program coordinator at the Center on Community Living and Careers and the Indiana Institute on Disability and Community. That is quite a mouthful, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to hand things over to you. Do you guys have a preference if people have questions during the presentation? Do you want
Yeah, I
presentation?
mean, it's dinner time. People may or may not have eaten. I'm a very casual person, laid back to begin with. So if you have questions along the way, just interrupt me. It's
Perfect.
not gonna throw me for a loop. I think it's often best when we can just have conversations, and chances are if you have the question, somebody else might have the question, and it's just nice to get questions answered in real time. So you can, hey, Kristen Moore, you can pop in and just take yourself off mute and ask, or if you want to put the question in chat, Kathleen's going to be watching chat, I think.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, we'll just, get started. So welcome everybody. Thanks for popping in, and thank you, Stephanie, for inviting us to share information about employment. We're going to have, I think, about 45 minutes, and then we can turn it over to Q&A, or like I say, we can ask questions along the way. I should give a disclaimer before I start that I began professionally in um, supported employment in 1983 at a Kentucky agency that was one of the first, if not the first, supported employment program in Kentucky. It was in a rural area, Crestwood, Kentucky. Crestwood is built up now, but back in the day, it was very rural. You had a Dairy Queen on the corner and everybody knew everybody. So I have a decidedly subjective viewpoint about competitive employment and everyone's ability, if they choose, to seek out competitive employment. So that's just the caveat I'll start you out with. So with me, you're not going to get a middle of the roader. I'm all in with CIE. So you've already introduced us. We're with Center on Community Living and Careers at the Indiana Institute on Disability and Community at Indiana University. And it is quite but Kathleen and I have learned that we can get it out with just one breath, so it's very, it's a skill set. Okay. And you see here on this slide, some of the people at CCLC. These are all of my colleagues. We have just gotten through. We're in the process of hiring part-time folks because work has a decided uptick lately, and we need to build our capacity. I believe that in the spring we will be hiring a full-time person. But for now, you see everybody there. And we all deliver content. I'm looking off to the side or down sometimes because I'm advancing the PowerPoint. But depending on our subject matter expertise, we all contribute in different ways, and together, we make up the whole team. So let's talk about competitive integrated employment, CIE. I don't know why the helping profession or policymakers have to make the wording so weird. Let's just call it a job, you know? But we give it these fancy terms, and I think we make it off-putting or intimidating or fill in the blank when we don't have to, right? So, but let's talk about what we do mean by competitive, integrated employment. So on slide 5, what you're going to see are different pieces of legislation that are federal legislation having to do with the definition of competitive integrated employment. And CIE, which is what I'm going to call it right now, thank you, Kathleen, has certain characteristics. And we'll be going through all those characteristics. But Title 34, the Code of Regulations, it defines competitive employment much like 2, 3, 4, and 5 do on this slide. So competitive employment is employment for people who have not historically been employed, or for whom employment has been interrupted or intermittent because of the result of impact or impacts of disability, and who, because of the nature and severity of those impacts, we all know that's a great big old bell curve, benefit from intensive support services long term to maintain employment. So, there's a few other elements, and we'll get to those. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act has the same global definition of CIE that the other pieces of legislation do. And then in 1986, the Rehabilitation Act, it was originally amended from the 73 Act, opened up additional funds for supported employment because more and more people who had traditionally been excluded from employment were being included for employment. And so, when you have extra reading time, did we lose Kathleen? I don't know if we did or not. Oh no, there she is. Who did we lose? Stephanie. If you ever find on a Friday night that you have extra reading time and you want to get an adult beverage and climb up in your recliner, slide 5 gives you all the reading that you probably would want to do. Title II now at the bottom, that specifically has to do with what's called the Olmstead Act. And you can Google that, Olmstead, and look it up. That's all about integration. And states across the nation are being put on, excuse me, high alert about the integration mandates that are coming down through the federal government. Although the feds have tended to warble, as they often do, on integration, I think the writing is on the wall, in my opinion. So let's go to slide 6. So competitive integrated employment is employment that meets 3 criteria, right? The first criteria is that it's part-time or full-time. It can be 5 hours a week. It can be 2 hours a week. It can be 70 hours a week. It's full-time or part-time employment where the person employed is paid at a rate equal to or higher than minimum wage. And that often depends on the nature of the work tasks that they're performing. So the pay is at least minimum wage and it could be higher. Now, if a person is interested in self-employment, that also is considered CIE. And in the case of a person who's self-employed, the income needs to yield an amount that would be comparable to the income received by other people who are not people with disabilities who are self-employed in the same type of occupation. So there's a comparative threshold there, but paid at a rate greater than or equal to minimum wage. The second criteria is that the employment is occurring in an integrated location. Integrated means you're working in the community. And there are additional facets around what we mean by integration. And we can go into those in a little, a little bit further if you want to, but I think everyone understands, integrated location, located at working in the community. And the third element is that there are opportunities for advancement. People often forget that one when we're talking about CIE. So there are opportunities for advancement for people with disabilities that are similar to those available to anybody else that works in that job, that have, equal levels of education or experience, right? So it's a level playing field is what we're after there. Again, self-employment, don't know why my phone's going off, telecommuting, and customized employment are all considered CIE. Have you guys ever heard of customized employment? Just put yes or no in the chat. No? Oh, gravy buckets. Well, let's spend a little bit of time talking about customized employment. And the two examples that I have to show you are actually both customized employment. So this will blow your mind, but customized employment is really about, there's my phone again, finding a job for tomorrow that doesn't exist today. It's a really cool approach. And that sentence is going to make sense when I share with you a little bit of Mike's story and a little bit of Mallory's story. Okay. Let's see. What else do I need to tell you about this? I think that gets it. And again, if you have questions, just holler. Now, before we go any farther, let's talk about what competitive integrated employment is not. Supported employment or competitive integrated employment. It's called by different things, but it's the same: supported employment, customized employment, self-employment, CIE. We're talking about the same thing here. Supported employment is not employment, full or part-time, that occurs in a segregated environment. So the RSA, the Rehabilitation Service Administration, and the Workforce Improvement and Opportunity Act consider employment integrated when two things are present. Employment is integrated when the setting can typically be found in the community, and it's not formed for the specific purposes of employing individuals with disabilities. That's very important. That squarely places where the job is found in this yard or that yard, right? So the employment setting must typically be found in the community. And the employment setting has to be one where the person with the disability interacts with other employees and the entire work unit or other persons such as customers to the same extent that employees who are not people with disabilities interact with those same persons, right? Supervisors, agency personnel like a job coach, they're not included in the nature of the interactions, right? So the person with a disability is interacting with other people, the entire work unit, customers, to the same extent that other people are. If those two elements are present, the job then has to meet the definition of competitive integrated employment by virtue of, minimum, at least minimum wage or above, in an integrated setting, and opportunity for advancement. So there's lots of little nuances there when we're talking about CIE. Hello, Jerry Pettit and company. Glad you could join us. I hope I didn't butcher your last name. Questions so far? Okay. CIE then is not employment that is below minimum wage, or what we typically refer to as subminimum wage, right? So by definition, CIE or supported employment is not a sheltered workshop because we're looking at subminimum wage there. So it's not employment where the person earns less than minimum wage. Earnings have to be at minimum wage or higher. And then enclaves. Enclaves are not considered supported employment, nor are mobile work crews. An enclave is an alternative hiring arrangement, and it's typically created by agencies. It features a small, distinct area or group enclosed or isolated from a larger one. Enclaves, they might pay at, below, or above competitive wages. The pay is sort of all over the board, but they do not pass the criteria for a non-segregated environment. And enclaves are typically operated for the express purpose of employing people with disabilities. And that's not typically found in the community. Remember, when we go back to the definition, the business, the work environment must be one that's typically found in the community or found in the typical community. If you're not familiar with enclaves or mobile work crews, it might be well worth your time doing some research just to learn more about what those are. They are, I would say, in my experience, when I was first starting in employment services, mobile work crews were all over the place, especially in rest stops, especially in landscape types of crews that just stayed in their own unit and traveled from place to place or contract to contract. But it would be interesting reading at very minimum. So the mobile work crews are groups of people with disabilities. They're working in the community as a crew or a team, and they are usually hired by and paid by the social service agency to perform contracts with varying contracts that the agency has. They don't meet the criteria for integration, so they're not considered competitive integrated employment. That was a whole lot on that slide. What questions do you guys have? And if you don't have any, that's okay. As soon as we hang up, you'll have a question. And if that happens, you can just email me. I think I have my email at the end of this PowerPoint. But you can always email and ask questions, and I'll get back to you.
Got a quick question.
Okay.
Do you know of any enclaves in central Indiana or these mobile work crews, or is that something that's just not in this area?
Oh, it's in this area. They're all over Indiana. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. I just
Every state, in every state you will find enclaves and mobile work crews.
okay. I just had never heard
Absolutely.
of either one of those terms, so I was just curious.
Okay. Well, good. See, this is great. So you're going to be learning new stuff. You're going to be reading about it. So that's great. I'm glad that you've never heard of them. Quite honestly, the research that's been coming out lately has been really, really interesting. The research, and you guys by and far look much younger than I am, but the research is showing that this generation of parents, like the more recent generations of parents, are far less tolerant of their son or daughter with a disability working in anywhere but competitive integrated employment, whether that's 5 hours a week or 40 hours a week. And so that tide has really started, to change a little bit. But by the same token, decades and decades ago, parents and people with disabilities didn't have nearly as many choices as they have now. So, yeah, Stephanie, did you have a
I,
question?
I just wanted to, well, it appears that I do in the chat box, but it's for anyone who notices many Stephanie Garners, everyone accidentally logged in as me. That's my bad. But um, there's a question of will those be phased out when like sheltered workshops and facility pre-voc ends?
A personal opinion is that as long as there is a perceived need for them, there will always be people who seek them out, and there will always be agencies willing to accommodate. That has to do, in my opinion, with a business model that hasn't been fully adjusted to trend towards competitive integrated employment and that stream of funding that can keep an agency afloat. That's my personal opinion. My professional opinion is that I see less and less of mobile work crews and enclaves, and I think that's because generational expectations are changing. Absolutely. That reminds me, Stephanie, one thing, like when we provide technical assistance to agencies, specifically an employment services program, that might be working with people that are attending a sheltered workshop operated by the same agency. So the same agency they're operating both sheltered workshops, maybe an enclave, maybe a work crew, and employment services. And staff at employment services are often very eager and passionate about the work they do, and they want everybody to work in competitive integrated employment. And what's the golden rule? You don't take something away unless you have something to offer, right? You don't take something away without something in its place. And so I think, that's a shift that has to occur too. Kathleen may disappear for a minute. Okay, Kathleen, you can disappear. That's okay. I mean, not forever, but just for a little bit. Was that a
No.
private message? Sorry.
Yes, it was a private message, but that's okay.
Sorry.
In case anyone knows. My snow shovelers just came to plow out my driveway, so they were supposed to come this morning, so I apologize.
Sorry, I didn't look. I just saw the message pop up. Okay. So, I think that, the journey from, we're on slide 8, from sheltered workshop to CIE is really a personal one for everybody. And it's got to involve careful evaluation. It's got to involve support from service providers, the larger team. And there's got to be a focus on employment, obviously. The significant advantage of CIE, if you choose that as your path, is that you can test your skills, you can identify some employment goals that you want to achieve. It's a much more personalized route of employment that gives you autonomy and some choice, or gives that autonomy and choice back to you. You can pick your work hours. You can focus on or decide what your interests are. You can apply for jobs, get help applying for jobs. The whole transition team that we'll talk about just a little bit later should be there every step of the way to help you understand what job expectations are, to help you increase your skills for employment, and to sort of adapt to your new surroundings. It's a real transition when people have never had a competitive integrated job and then all of a sudden they're working. That's a real shock to the system for some folks. So, okay. Competitive integrated employment. And this is a little bit of a repeat. That's okay, because some things are worth repeating. It can be a labor market job full or part-time. A labor market job is just a job that already exists. You can walk down any street in Main Street, unless it's 0 degrees outside like we have, and see help wanted signs. You can see advertisements for job openings. These are positions that the employer already has open because they fit the needs of the employer, right? Obviously. So that's a labor market job. It's already there, ready to be filled. Or a customized job, which somebody could start tomorrow, but it doesn't exist today. Or it can be self-employment, right? It can be any of those things. So I went back and pulled information from DASOS, which is a report that the Center on Community, well, not Center on Community Living and Careers, but a center at the Indiana Institute completes every year, and it's a polling of agencies to try to get a thumb on the pulse of what most people are doing nowadays with their time. And so you see the breakdown here. That this represents a real change, and you can see where things are trending. Now, granted, this isn't everyone in the community who's receiving services, because not every agency reports to DASOS. So of the reporting agencies, you can kind of see that, where people are. Sheltered employment, you're familiar with. I think everybody understands that term and knows what that is. Community employment, CIE, so almost a third of people that are out of school and have transitioned to their adult life, 18 or older, are working in the community at a job. Now, we don't know how many hours, we just know that they're working, right? This DASOS report actually does break down some of that information into granular form. So if you put in DASOS 2024, and you Google that, you'll be able to pull up the report and kind of read it yourself. And that's always really interesting. Almost a quarter of people are attending day services, and almost half fall into the other category, which means that, they may, they're not attending sheltered workshop. They're not at a adult day program. They're not at a job in the community. So they may be spending a lot of time at home in an unstructured way. They may have waiver services and get what's called PAC services that help them engage in and around their community, like leisure activities, meaningful activities for them, but activities that aren't considered sheltered CIE or day services. By the same token, they may be very idle and not engaged in meaningful activity. So again, I just wanted to give you a snapshot, but if you're interested, you can certainly take a look at that report and read all about it. So let's talk about your rights. We're on slide 13. A person might want to work in a sheltered workshop. And if you do, you need to understand, or that person needs to understand, parents need to understand that there are other alternatives to create a meaningful life. Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act is what allows employers or agencies to pay workers with disabilities less than the federal minimum wage. And because of that, sheltered workshops often pay at a piece rate or below minimum wage. And that makes it really difficult to earn an impactful income, right? Now, there are changes underway in the state of Indiana around waiver funding for sheltered employment, and we'll talk about that right now. Let's just talk about it right now. So in 2027, Medicaid waivers. So that's typically going to be your family support waiver and your community habilitation and integration waiver. If you're currently working in a sheltered workshop, you're going to experience some changes relative to using your Medicaid budget to attend a sheltered workshop. So Indiana has already begun the transition away from use of Medicaid funds to attend and support sheltered employment. And Indiana intends to stop the ability of a person on a waiver to use their waiver budget to support them to attend a sheltered workshop. Now, instead, there are going to be other heightened options like pre-vocational services or skill building opportunities. And those are really geared to help you integrate more into community employment. But don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, people have a choice. And if a person chooses not to seek competitive integrated employment, we have to be okay with that. At the end of the day, if they do want to seek it out, they do want to get a job, and let's say they have significant impacts of disability, then our charge is to figure out what work would look like for them, right? So a person with significant impacts of disability not being able to find work, you often hear, well, I do. I don't know if you do. I shouldn't assume. But I often hear they're too disabled to work. Now, in my opinion, the agency simply isn't creative enough to get it figured out. Two very different things, right? So, but at the end of the day, people have a choice. Your case manager, if you have a Medicaid waiver, you have a case manager. And they can help explain some of the changes relative to sheltered employment that are going to be locked in 2027. I think it's late spring of 2027 is the last that I heard. But you know how often those things change. Every time you blink, right? In terms of a timeline. So 14C certificates are monitored and approved by the Department of Labor. Now, the Department of Labor has come under a lot of criticism, rightly so, because they have really been struggling to properly oversee 14C certificates. I think their oversight and management is going to probably improve a lot over the years. In Indiana, we're seeing less and less in terms of the number of sheltered employment programs that are available. My brain wants to tell me there are 22 right now across the entire state. Don't hold me to that because my brain file has told me wrong things before. So some of the drawbacks of a sheltered workshop, and this is something that I share with you because you can share it with students or people that are trying to make a decision or a choice. So you might notice if you're working in a sheltered workshop that there's typically a few job types that are available to you. That's because the workshop has limited contracts that are coming in, right? And they might not always be available every day, even on top of that. And that can be frustrating if you're wanting to earn a paycheck while you're working in a job, a paycheck that's meaningful for you and lets you do things that are meaningful for you. It's likely that your coworkers are other people who use services as well. So there can be limited opportunities to befriend those outside of the workshop area. Now that depends on a lot of other things too, right? It's not the singular decision point. Again, I would just encourage you, there is ample research, ample opinion, oh my goodness, about sheltered versus CIE, and you can decide for yourself. That's always the best way to go. Listen, learn, read, and decide for yourself, right? And you can find a plethora of information, both peer researched articles and layman's material that will compare CIE to sheltered employment. You know what? That would make a fantastic transition service and activity. If a student were to like do their own research exploration of the differences, if they're not sure what they want to do post school, it might make a great thing for moms and dads to help the student do too, at any rate. In Indiana, we have what's called the Employment First Act. Indiana was not the first state in the union to develop employment first legislation, but we have had it since 2017. So we've had it for 8 years. We're ahead of the curve on a lot of states. We're ahead of the curve on many of our neighbors that surround us when it comes to employment first legislation. So it's the vision of making employment the first priority and preferred outcome of services for people with disabilities. And it means that the state funding, service providers, we're expecting, encouraging, providing, creating, rewarding, whatever you want to call it, integrated employment in the workforce. And this is why you see currently, part of the reason that you see people attending sheltered workshops are receiving informational guidance about the availability and opportunity for non-sheltered work, right? That's actually written into our state laws. But Employment First legislation in Indiana, 2017. The Americans with Disabilities Act. Everybody's heard of that nowadays, right? That prohibits employers with 15 or more employees from discriminating against qualified people with disabilities in hiring, firing, pay and promotions, and it requires reasonable accommodations to perform those essential job functions. And the ADA is overseen by 641, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is why you see EEOC down there. Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. I'm going to let you read about that. Most of you are probably familiar with it because it is what facilitates vocational rehabilitation's budget allocation to pre-employment transition services for students in our high schools. So as I said, supported employment and customized employment, they're different. They're under the same umbrella. They can live in the same house, but they're in different bedrooms, right? So let me tell you about Mike. Mike has a job. Let's say it started on Monday. I don't remember what day he started. And it wasn't available on Sunday, right? So with customized employment, what you're seeing is individualized negotiation for a job based on the skills and contributions that a person can bring to the workplace. Unlike a labor market job that already has the job description kind of pointed out, you have job tasks A through Z, and you've got to be able to do all of them. With customized employment, you're not starting with that job description. You're starting with what Mike has to offer. And it's up to the employment specialist to figure out, by building relationships with employers, how that employer might use what Mike has to offer to make the value to be had by hiring Mike offset the cost of hiring Mike. It's a business proposition that starts with individualized negotiation. Mike has a customized job. Now, Mike has significant mental health challenges, really struggles with knowing how to be appropriate around females. He had jobs, lots of jobs, and they never stuck. God, they just never stuck. Just not quite right. Now, Mike loves cars. And let me tell you, he could detail a car like nobody's business. That is what Mike can bring to an employer. We all have it. We all have giftedness. I don't think you can be born into this world without giftedness. Sometimes the disability obscures it so much that we don't see it, but it's there. So for people that knew Mike, like his employment specialist, we knew that guy's really good at detailing cars. So here's what happened. The employment specialist visited employers. One of them that he visited was the Clark County Auto Auction. And it was a place that auctioned vehicles, repossessed vehicles, police confiscated vehicles, damaged vehicles. And they arrived at Clark County Auto Lot, and the auto lot would just flip them, right? Get one in on a Monday, auction it on a Tuesday, right? So the employment specialist said to Clark County Auto Auction, give Mike 2 weeks. He will detail the engine and the interior of the vehicles before they go up for auction. And you will see an increase in profits because what Mike brings to the table will get you higher bids at auction. Give Mike a 2-week trial period. And do you know that they hired Mike before the first week ended? Because that is indeed what they were witnessing. Now, that job didn't exist on a Sunday, but the employment specialist negotiated it to start on a Monday. You see what I mean there by it didn't exist before the employment specialist negotiated the creation of it with the employer. That's called customized employment. This is another example. Now, Mallory, you see Mallory uses a wheelchair. Now, watch what I do with my neck. Okay, you ready? That is the limit of Mallory's voluntary control of her body. Right? Now, we had to talk VR, wasn't in Indiana, it was a different state, into opening a case for Mallory because VR said she can't work. She can't benefit from VR services. She can't work. So we basically said, give us an opportunity to prove you wrong, right? Now, it took a minute, don't get me wrong, but what you don't see to the right side of Mallory is a big red switch. So when Mallory goes like this, the switch activates the story pages on the iPad that you see mounted to Mallory's chair, and at the same time, concurrently triggers a pre-recorded reading of the book. Now, off to the left bottom corner of that picture, do you see the little kid's black shoe there? You see the little child sitting, all you see is her foot. There's a room full of children that are being read to by Miss Mallory. They call her Miss Mallory. It's just the culture of the school, right? And so Mallory reads to 3, 4, and 5-year-old groups of children at a local daycare in her hometown, right? So it's not that Mallory can't work, it's that you've got to figure it out, right? So what Mallory brings is her desire to be around children. She lights up. She enjoys being around children. It was up to the agency and VR to figure out what kind of technology, assistive technology, Mallory needed to be able to let that giftedness shine at an employer that would be able to use her skills. Now, this employer, it was a daycare, and they used to have a local pastor come by and read to the children. As the church grew, the pastor wasn't, they just weren't able to keep doing that. But the daycare really wanted dedicated reading time, and Mallory was able to fill that position. Now, does she work 20 hours a week? No. About 2 hours a day is all that Mallory's body will let her do. Now, on a Sunday, that job didn't exist, but on a Monday, it did. And it was negotiated with the employer in such a way that it benefits Mallory by giving her a job, and it benefits the business by providing something they can use. It's a business proposition. It's an equal exchange. Does that help frame what customized employment is a little bit? Yeah? Okay. So most people use vocational rehabilitation to access an employment services provider. Sometimes people work only with the vocational rehabilitation counselor, but oftentimes when you have a significant impact of disability, you're going to be allowed to select a service provider in your area that will work with you to help you find a job. Vocational rehabilitation is no longer under order of selection, which meant they had to limit the numbers of people that they could take active referrals on and find eligible. We're no longer under order of selection. And so it's wide open. If you know someone who's interested in working, all you have to do is phone your closest VR office and say, I want to get services. That is as simple as it gets. And that's all you need to do. So place the phone call, share your identifying information, and VR will get the ball rolling. They'll help develop an IPE or an individualized plan of employment. They'll give you a list of service agency providers that you can choose from. They have a whole menu, VR does, of goods and services that will help you achieve your goal. Now, VR can even help you with your educational goals, a bachelor's degree, an associate's degree, a certification. Now, they can't help you with that and a job at the same time. It's sort of like, what do you want, education or certification, or do you want to work? But VR can help with both of those. Yes, absolutely. As somebody can work with VR without being on one of the home and community-based waivers. As long as you have a qualifying condition, you can work. VR can find you eligible. There's lots of people that are on that waiver waiting list, right? For heaven's sakes, absolutely. You do not have to be on a waiver. It is not a condition to receive services. And VR has rehabilitation engineers that actually help people. Yeah, it's great, Jade, that actually help people figure out the assistive technology that they need. When my brother Jason started working, one of his biggest struggles was getting the heck up in the morning, right? And I can't tell you what a chore it was for me and my husband to get him up every freaking morning that he worked. And so what VR did was they had a person come down from InTech at Easter Seals Crossroads, and they did an in-home evaluation and figured out what goods and services Jason could benefit from to help him maintain employment. And one of those things was, I'm going to call it the wrong thing, but it was a daylight simulator, so that it was mounted up in the corner of his room. And at 7 a.m. on his work days, it was programmed to gradually flood his bedroom with simulated daylight, which helped him wake up and get going. So VR has an entire, menu of goods and services that they can help with. Here's some resources on 22 from VR. And Stephanie has evidently, sorry I did that to you. I sent you a page and a half of resource links, but Stephanie has a whole slew of resources. These are some things that your provider agency should be providing you with: individualized services, support, job coaching, long-term supports. When VR successfully closes your case after you start a job, if you have a waiver, what happens is, as the VR door closes, your waiver funding door opens, so that if you need ongoing support and you have a waiver, you can use what's called extended funding to continue to receive job coaching supports, both off-site and on-site. Slide 24, a whole bunch of resources. The top two I would draw your attention to. If you're a person receiving supported employment services, or if you're the parent of a person receiving supported employment services, the APSE top two links, link 1 and link 2, if you open those and you read them, you're going to learn exquisitely what a good employment services program looks like. If you don't know what it looks like, you're not going to know you're not getting it. So all of these resources are good resources to have. Here's extended services. You can use that if you have a waiver and you have a job. VR has successfully closed you, but you still need supports. These are some of the strategies an adult service provider might use. Things they do to help you find and maintain a job. They should be really good at job development. A lot of them struggle with job development. And here's some additional resources. This last one is the Vocational Rehabilitation Manual of Employment Services, the official manual. You can actually click that and see what an employment service program should be doing. Okay, what questions do you have? I'm sorry, I only left 3 minutes. Sorry.
Well, I tell you what, let me say thank you so much, you guys, for coming. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now so that if folks have questions, they can ask without it being
Oh, that's a good
public
idea.
record. So thank you guys so much for all of the information.
You're welcome.